Every story begins with a question. Tonight we will search for the answer together. So, come closer and let the past speak for itself.
Imagine standing beneath the night sky, tens of thousands of years ago. There are no cities, no books, no science, no written language, only fire, the stars above, and questions. Every civilization that has ever existed has looked into that same sky. The Egyptians, the Greeks, the Chinese, the Maya, Vikings, medieval monks, modern scientists, every one of them searched for answers to the same mystery. Why are we here? Where did everything come from? And is there something beyond the universe itself? Few questions have shaped human history more than one simple idea: God. Entire empires were built around it. Kings ruled in its name. Wars were fought because of it. Millions found hope through it. Millions rejected it. Even today, after centuries of scientific discoveries, humanity remains deeply divided. Some are absolutely certain that God exists. Others are equally convinced that there is no God at all. Books have been written. Debates have lasted for centuries. Philosophers, priests, scientists, atheists, all trying to answer the same question. But what if everyone has been asking the wrong question? Because before we can ask whether God exists, we first have to understand, what does it actually mean for something to exist? This is not just a religious question. It is one of the oldest problems in philosophy. And surprisingly, the answer may have less to do with religion than with the way the human mind understands reality itself. Imagine someone asks you a simple question: does justice exist? Most people would immediately answer, of course it does. But then imagine a second question. Can you point to justice? Can you hold it in your hands? Can you measure its weight? Suddenly, the answer becomes much less obvious. Justice exists, but not in the same way a mountain exists, or an ocean, or a tree. We interact with ideas differently than we interact with physical objects. And this is where many debates about God begin to fall apart. For centuries, people have argued over one question: does God exist? Believers answer yes, skeptics answer no. But philosophers often ask a completely different question. What do we actually mean by the word exist? Throughout history, philosophers have distinguished between different kinds of existence. Some things exist physically. You can touch them, measure them, observe them. Others exist as ideas. Languages exist, mathematics exists, music exists, nations exist. None of these can be placed inside a laboratory. Yet no serious person would claim they are meaningless. Even fictional characters exist, not as living people, but as concepts that influence millions of minds. Sherlock Holmes never walked the streets of London, yet almost everyone knows his name. His existence is cultural, not biological. The same applies to myths, symbols, traditions, and religions. Whether someone believes in God or not, the idea of God undeniably exists. It has inspired art, architecture, laws, philosophy, music, entire civilizations. Cathedrals were built because of it. Wars were fought because of it. People devoted their entire lives to it. So before asking whether God exists outside the human mind, we must first recognize something much simpler. The concept of God already exists inside human history, and that fact alone has changed the world. This is where philosophy makes an important distinction. Asking whether the idea of God exists is very different from asking whether God exists as an objective reality independent of human thought. These are not the same question. Confusing them has fueled centuries of misunderstanding. Science investigates the observable universe. Philosophy investigates the meaning of our concepts. Religion often speaks about what lies beyond observation. When these three domains are treated as if they were identical, confusion becomes inevitable, and perhaps that confusion is exactly why this debate has never truly ended. If the idea of God has shaped civilizations, then another question naturally follows. Can God's existence actually be proven? At first glance, the answer seems simple. Science is built on evidence. Religion is built on faith. Surely one of them must be right. But history tells a much more complicated story. For over 2,000 years, some of the greatest minds in history have tried to answer this question, not with emotion, not with revelation, but with reason. Ancient Greek philosophers searched for a first cause, an explanation for why anything exists at all. Centuries later, Medieval theologians expanded these ideas into formal arguments. One of the most influential thinkers was Thomas Aquinas. In the 13th century, he proposed what became known as the Five Ways, 5 philosophical arguments intended to demonstrate that belief in God could be supported by logic. One argument began with motion. Everything that moves must be moved by something else. If every movement has a cause, then the chain cannot continue forever. Eventually, there must be a first mover. Another argument focused on cause and effect. Every event appears to have a cause. Every cause is linked to another cause before it. So where does the chain begin? Aquinas argued that an uncaused cause must exist, a necessary foundation for everything else. To him, that foundation was God. These arguments influenced philosophy for centuries. They remain some of the most famous attempts to reconcile reason and faith, but they were never universally accepted. Critics raised difficult questions. Why must the chain have a beginning? Could the universe itself be eternal? And if everything requires a cause, then what caused the first cause? Every answer seemed to create another question. Every solution opened another door. As philosophy evolved, the debate became even more complex. Some thinkers argued that logic alone could never reach beyond the universe. Others insisted that reason naturally points toward something greater than the material world. Centuries passed. Science transformed humanity's understanding of reality. Telescopes revealed distant galaxies. Microscopes uncovered invisible worlds. Physics explained forces once thought supernatural. Yet despite all these discoveries, no experiment has ever demonstrated the existence of God, and no experiment has ever demonstrated God's non-existence. This is where many public debates become misleading. Science can test phenomena that produce observable evidence. It measures, compares, repeats, verifies. But if God is defined as existing beyond space, beyond time, beyond the physical universe, then such a being would, by definition, lie outside the reach of scientific instruments. That does not prove God exists, but neither does it prove God does not exist. It simply reveals the limits of a particular method of inquiry. Science answers questions about the natural world. Faith addresses questions that many believers consider to lie beyond it. Philosophy asks whether those questions are even being framed correctly. 3 different approaches, 3 different goals, and perhaps that is why the debate has continued for thousands of years. Not because humanity lacks intelligence, but because the question itself may belong to more than one way of understanding reality. Long before temples, long before priests, long before sacred books, there were only people and nature. Imagine waking up 40,000 years ago. There is no weather forecast, no medicine, no astronomy, no science. Every sunrise feels like a miracle. Every storm feels alive. Lightning strikes without warning. Rivers flood without explanation. The stars move across the sky with perfect precision. Yet no one knows why. To survive, early humans needed more than food. They needed explanations. Because the unknown is terrifying, especially when your life depends on understanding it. Why did the hunt fail? Why did the rains never come? Why did children die? Why did disease appear without warning? Why does the sun disappear every evening, only to return the next morning? Every unanswered question demanded an answer, and the human mind did what it has always done. It searched for patterns. It searched for meaning. It searched for intention. Slowly, the world became populated with invisible beings. Spirits lived in forests. Rivers had guardians. Mountains possessed power. The wind had a voice. The animals had souls. Nothing was truly lifeless. The universe itself seemed alive. Today, historians call many of these early beliefs animism, the idea that every part of nature possesses a spiritual essence. But to the people living thousands of years ago, this was not mythology. It was reality. They were not pretending. They genuinely experienced the world this way. To them, there was no clear line between the physical world and the spiritual one. Every ritual had a purpose. Every symbol carried meaning. Every ceremony was an attempt to influence forces that seemed invisible, yet overwhelmingly real. Within every community, certain individuals claimed they could communicate with those unseen forces. They became healers, storytellers, spiritual guides. We know them today as shamans. Their role extended far beyond religion. They preserved traditions, remembered history, interpreted dreams, led ceremonies, helped communities cope with fear, loss, and uncertainty. In many ways, they became humanity's first philosophers, the first psychologists, the first historians, and perhaps the first scientists. Because they were trying to answer exactly the same questions science would later ask. They simply used different methods. Then, everything changed. Around 12,000 years ago, humans began farming. Villages appeared, populations grew, seasons became more important than ever before. Agriculture required planning, calendars, organization, predictability. Religion changed as well. Nature spirits slowly gave way to powerful gods, gods of the sun, gods of rain, gods of harvest, gods of kings. The larger societies became, the more structured their religions became. And as the first cities emerged, so did the first great temples. Religion was no longer simply a way of explaining nature. It became a way of organizing civilization itself. Looking back, it is easy to dismiss these ancient beliefs as superstition, but doing so misses something important. Religion was one of humanity's earliest attempts to build a coherent picture of reality. It offered explanations, moral rules, shared stories, and a sense of belonging. Long before universities, long before laboratories, religion became the first great framework through which humanity tried to understand the universe. Whether its conclusions were correct or not, its influence on civilization is impossible to deny. As villages became cities, religion evolved once again. It was no longer only about explaining thunder or asking for rain. It became something far more powerful, a foundation for civilization itself. The first great cities rose along fertile rivers: Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus Valley, ancient China. These societies faced a challenge unlike anything humanity had known before. Thousands, then tens of thousands, of complete strangers now live together. How do you create order among people who will never know each other personally? Laws helped. Armies enforce them, but laws alone rarely inspire loyalty. Shared beliefs do. Religion offered something governments alone could not: a common story, a common identity, a common moral language. Temples became more than places of worship. They became centers of education, of trade, of record-keeping, of political authority. Priests were not simply religious leaders. In many civilizations, they were astronomers, advisors, architects, physicians, and guardians of knowledge. Long before universities existed, many of humanity's earliest discoveries were preserved within sacred institutions. Across the ancient world, religion shaped nearly every aspect of life. The Egyptians believed that maintaining cosmic order was a sacred duty. In Mesopotamia, kings ruled with divine authority. In ancient India, spiritual traditions explored consciousness itself. In China, philosophers debated harmony between heaven, humanity, and nature. Meanwhile, the ancient Greeks began asking questions that would transform philosophy forever. Could reason reveal truths that myths could not? Could the universe operate according to universal laws? For the first time, rational inquiry and religious tradition began to develop side by side, sometimes in harmony, sometimes in conflict, but together, they pushed human civilization forward. As centuries passed, religions grew beyond cities, beyond kingdoms, beyond continents. Judaism emphasized a covenant between humanity and one God. Christianity spread across the Roman Empire, carrying a message that reached people from every social class. Islam united vast regions stretching from Spain to Central Asia, becoming one of history's greatest centers of scholarship and scientific discovery. Buddhism traveled across Asia, offering a path centered on suffering, compassion, and self-understanding. Different beliefs, different traditions, different answers, yet each attempted to solve the same fundamental mystery. How should human beings live? What gives life meaning? And what, if anything, awaits us beyond death? Religion inspired extraordinary acts of compassion. It also became intertwined with power. Cathedrals reached toward the sky. Libraries preserved ancient knowledge. Hospitals and charities emerged from religious communities. Yet history also records crusades, persecution, forced conversions, and wars fought in the name of faith. the same force that united millions, sometimes divided them. Like every powerful human institution, religion reflected both humanity's highest ideals and its deepest flaws. To understand history honestly, we must recognize both, and then everything changed again. Telescopes revealed worlds beyond imagination. The scientific revolution challenged centuries of accepted knowledge. The Earth was no longer the center of the universe. Nature increasingly appeared to operate through discoverable laws rather than constant supernatural intervention. Humanity entered a new age, one in which science would become our most powerful tool for understanding the physical universe. But one ancient question refused to disappear. If science could explain how the universe works, could it also explain why it exists at all? More than 400 years ago, humanity began a revolution, not with armies, but with questions. Galileo turned a telescope toward the heavens. Newton described the mathematics of motion. Darwin transformed our understanding of life. Einstein reshaped space and time themselves. With every discovery, the universe appeared less mysterious. Lightning no longer required an angry god. Disease no longer required evil spirits. The movement of planets no longer required invisible hands. Science succeeded where myth could not. It revealed patterns, tested ideas, and replaced speculation with evidence. It became the most powerful method humanity has ever developed for understanding the natural world. Yet every answer uncovered another question. The deeper we looked, the stranger reality became. Modern cosmology tells us that the observable universe had a beginning. Nearly 14 billion years ago, space itself began expanding. Galaxies formed, stars ignited, planets emerged. Eventually, life appeared. And after billions of years of evolution, a species evolved that could ask where it came from. But even today, science does not claim to know why there is something rather than nothing. It can describe the earliest moments we can observe. It can reconstruct the history of the cosmos with astonishing precision. But what, if anything, preceded those moments? Remains one of the greatest mysteries in modern physics. Some theories suggest our universe may be one of many. Others propose that time itself began with the Big Bang, making the question, what came before, fundamentally meaningless. These ideas are fascinating, but none has yet provided a final answer. Philosophy enters where measurement reaches its limits. It asks questions that cannot be settled by a telescope or a particle accelerator alone. What is consciousness? Why do mathematical laws describe reality so well? Does objective morality exist? Is meaning something we discover or something we create? These are not failures of science. They are different kinds of questions. Questions about interpretation rather than observation. Religion offers another perspective. For billions of people, the universe is not merely a collection of particles. It is creation, purpose, relationship, hope. Whether one accepts that view or not, it addresses a human need that has endured throughout history, the desire not only to understand the universe, but to understand our place within it. Perhaps this explains why the question of God has survived every age. It survived the rise of empires, the fall of kingdoms, scientific revolutions, industrial revolutions, the digital age, and the exploration of space. Not because humanity has failed to answer it, but because every generation discovers new reasons to ask it again. Maybe the greatest question was never, does God exist? Maybe the greater question is this: why does the human mind keep searching for something beyond itself? Why do we seek meaning, even in a universe that often seems indifferent? Why do beauty, love, justice, sacrifice, and hope feel so profoundly real? Whether those experiences point towards something beyond the material world or emerge entirely from the human mind remains one of the greatest mysteries we have ever encountered. Perhaps the search itself is part of what makes us human. Every civilization has left behind monuments, stories, prayers, equations, telescopes, libraries. All of them are expressions of the same desire: to understand reality, to understand ourselves, and to discover whether our existence has meaning. We may never all agree on the answer, but perhaps the willingness to keep asking is humanity's greatest achievement. Imagine a world where every mystery has been solved, every disease cured, every galaxy mapped, every law of physics understood. Would humanity finally stop asking questions? History suggests otherwise, because knowledge does not eliminate wonder. It often creates even more of it. The more we discover about the universe, the more extraordinary it appears. Every atom in your body was forged inside ancient stars. Every breath connects you to a planet billions of years old. Every thought emerges from a brain made of the same elements as distant galaxies. We understand more than ever before. Yet many of our deepest questions remain unchanged. Why do people continue to believe? The answer is more complex than simply saying, because they have faith. Religion has never been only about explaining lightning or the movement of planets. It answers different questions, questions about grief, forgiveness, hope, love, purpose, questions that every human being encounters sooner or later. Science can explain what happens inside the brain when we experience love. It can describe the chemistry of emotion, but it cannot tell us whom we ought to love, or why sacrifice can feel meaningful. These belong to a different kind of conversation. This is why belief has survived every technological revolution. Steam engines did not erase it. Electricity did not erase it. The internet did not erase it. Artificial intelligence is unlikely to erase it either, because every generation inherits the same questions. What is a good life? What makes suffering bearable? Why do we exist at all? Different cultures answer differently. Different religions answer differently. Some reject religion entirely and seek meaning through philosophy, through family, through art, through science itself. Yet the search continues. Perhaps the opposite of religion is not science, and the opposite of science is not faith. Perhaps the true opposite of both is indifference, the refusal to ask questions, the refusal to seek understanding. Throughout history, humanity has advanced because people were willing to wonder, to doubt, to imagine, to explore. Whether they were philosophers, monks, scientists, or explorers sailing into unknown oceans, they were driven by the same force: curiosity. Maybe that is the one belief shared by all humanity, the belief that reality, however mysterious, is worth exploring.
History leaves us with more than answers. It leaves us with questions worth asking. Until next time, keep searching.